Just gonna take a minute to kind of look at my palette, look at my still life, and think about, am I painting? What's gonna go where? And I'll take some of the pressure off of myself by reminding myself that it doesn't have to be perfect right now. This is just about getting that first layer of color on there. I don't even have, actually, as I'm looking at this, like the color of my flowers is this. You can see, let me yank one over here. This one's not even open, but you can see that the bud of that is basically quinacridone magenta, like practically right out of the tube. I don't have any of that color right now. This underpainting still has some of it showing through. So I know that I'm going to try to go to a store this week and buy that color. Now I need to try to at least put something on my palette that's close to that. The other thing that I could be thinking about also is this pink fabric and whether I want to match that perfectly. Once again, none of that color is on my palette. Almost every other color is on here that I can see in my still life, except, ooh, that's nice. I just like picked up some nice black paint. It's not all dry enough yet. So before I move forward, I'm going to do a little bit more mixing on this palette, and it's going to involve putting a little bit of cadmium yellow out. See, I'm running out of space. Real estate's becoming quite expensive on this palette. I'm going to take a little bit of this blue right here and mix that with this yellow to get green. It's a little brighter than I want, so maybe I'll grab a little more of this cerulean blue to deepen it. That'll do the trick. I'll want to mix another green later on, but that'll definitely get me started. And then this pink, if I decide I want to put it in the painting, let's just see what happens. Sorry, I'm having a power situation with my phone. Let's just see what happens if we add yellow to here. It's just more orange. But how about a little bit of cadmium red with that color? And you know, this isn't a color that I'm gonna need for the rest of the painting. So I'm not pulling away from my like supplies that I need for my bone supply. Or actually, I grabbed some Pyrrole Red Light. See if you can see that. I'm gonna try that. Kind of think of it as fire engine red. And then add more white to it. It's still very orange, not really approaching. This pink, well, it's actually closer than I thought. Particularly on the computer, it looks a little closer. I'm gonna still look for that cadmium red light. And a dollop of that. And a little more white. It's not perfect, but that'll work. And cleaning off my brush, or not my brush, my palette knife. Looking, all right, let's see what I got as far as my pinks. This is a quinacridone crimson. And I'm just gonna try mixing it with white and see what happens. This is my best shot with the palette, or the choices of pigments I have in my paint bag right now to get the color of my peonies today. It will not be exactly the color I need, because I happen to know from practice that that's going to be a quinacridone magenta or quinacridone red. But it'll certainly be bright and pink. So for today, it's going to suffice. And there is peonies that are that color pink. It just happens to not be quite right for the peonies that are in my life today. And I'll pull this one over again so we can all look at that. It's close, but there's just a little bit of a level of brightness that I can't get to. The other thing is that my value's a little light. So I'll go ahead and put a little bit of this right out of the tube. Golden's quinacridone red just has a little bit more of a brilliance to it. So I'll be going shopping for some of that. Put my palette up here to the side, and I'm just gonna go for it and get some paint on here. Start with the bone color, and I'm actually going for a little bit of a deeper value than it reads to me, because I want to get this in there as a base tone and then bring the light over top. You can see on my computer that this is reading actually really light. So you can go the next step darker. So on my palette, I'm just jumping back and forth between these two values. I'm going to want to highlight over here. And there will be more darks and more lines that I'm going to want to put in here later. But I'll get this base color in here first. And the interior in here is actually pretty dark. have to put my color on like a blanket where I just like cover up every single thing that was underneath. I want to let some of that, I want to be sensitive to that underpainting, and I'm going to let some of it show through. I might choose to put thicker paint in areas that are brighter and lighter. And sometimes I pull kind of the paint across fairly dry in areas to make it sort of scrubbier. In the interior of the bone, it's a little darker, so wet on wet, feathering in there darker. Doesn't have to be perfect, just trying to look at what I see and imitating it. That can be very meditative, just like mixing the little color blocks, like letting go of some of the stress around trying to get it just right and just thinking, when this, for now, I'm just gonna look at that value, try to put that value in between the lines that I already had down there. Not evaluating whether my lines are right or wrong, not evaluating at all. I'm constantly trying to bring myself back to a point of observation without thinking about whether I've done it correctly or not. Especially if you start getting that wobbly feeling of being off track, just be like, right here, what value do I see? How do I how do I get to that value? You can think about all the rights and wrongs of it, what worked and what didn't work 3 days from now. Don't even think about it right after you finish your painting or you finish painting for today, because you're not going to be, generally, unless you're different than me, which is very possible, generally what I observe in my students is that we're really hard on ourselves, and you're going to be quick to think that what you made was inadequate. You're going to look for all the things that are not great about it instead of what was really successful and wonderful today. So instead of evaluating and looking to criticize, just give yourself a free pass and focus on observing with curiosity where you're matching your values to what you're looking at. If you're feeling stressed out and bogged down by your process of painting, then ask yourself if you're being curious about it, because it's really hard to be bored and frustrated with something, or even feeling inadequate, if you're focusing on being, legitimately curious, like, how does that light hit there? Or I usually think it's like this, but actually it's like this. Letting yourself not know. gonna give myself about 5 more minutes here for the color, and then I'm gonna check in with everybody. I think this week, like last week, I'll spend at least a few minutes past 1 still working into what I'm making. It's a little, in this mid area, it's a little choppy. I think I want to get my flowers in before I start thinking about where the flower meets the skull and where the dark is. So I'm gonna wait on that. I'm also quickly going to try to paint in this fabric color, which is very different than the actual pinks of the flowers that I'm looking at, and the value's a little exaggerated on it, but once again I can kind of come in with a lighter value over top. And I'm painting it here on the highlights, but I'm gonna give the shadow a try again. I might not decide in the long run to keep it in here, because it is a little confusing for the eye, the way that the fabric slopes, so the shadow bends. At the same time, it's a very interesting marker, so I think it's worth a try putting it in there. And up across here I have some leaves, so I don't have them all painted in. They moved when my still life fell off the table. Now I've got more leaves in this area than I had originally. Rather than getting my brush out and trying to paint where each one of those are, I'm just creating some negative shape as I put this background color in. Before I close down today, I'm gonna take another photo to try to get those leaves where they're supposed to be. Or so I can remember if I decide to leave them in there. I'm having a good feeling about this pink against the black, so I think it might be here to stay. I can change my mind next week. I think next week, and this is a guess, I'm not sure, but we'll probably mix another color palette, and I might try to reapproach this painting. I couldn't promise to finish it. It's rare that I'm able to finish a painting in front of a group of people. It's like trying to thread a needle. I find it to be a little difficult. Just get this on here quick. Now, I could come across here and pull this pink in right now too, but I want this to be a little drier, as after I check in with you guys, I'm gonna paint on these flowers, so I'm gonna wait and not pull this pink color across. I am really happy with this pink against the blues and the whites of the skull color. I'd like, before I stop painting today, I won't be able to finish this painting with the kind of day I have ahead of me, so I'm gonna pull some greens into here. I'm going to get these pinks in for the peonies, and then probably I'll finish by coming across with this pink on the right hand side. But for now I'm gonna take a break and let this dry that's already on here and check in with each of you. So just rinse out my brush.